Our lessons for today is about encapsulation, abstraction, and class constructor. Three objectives: create a class that encapsulates a subclass, use layer of instruction, calling a class with message passing. For the definition of terms, encapsulation, what is encapsulation, abstraction, what is class constructor, what is instantiation. All of this can be found at Wikipedia. If you have further questions about this, you can ask me for further clarifications. Now, what we have here is a problem. The problem is we can create a case where the user logs in first before he can use Arduino applications for previous projects. Let us have a review first of the software development process. The software development process starts with planning, analysis, and then design, then implementation, and then maintenance, and it loops back all the way. The initial state of the software development is planning. The initial stage of the software development is planning. So what is the plan? There are three areas why you create or develop software. First, there might be a problem, there might be a directive, there might be an opportunity. In this case, we have a problem. The problem is we forget to collect the information of the user, thus allowing the user to see whatever projects we have. The second state of the software development is analysis. The second stage of software development is analysis. Let's try to look at the statement of the problem. The statement of the problem says that we forget to collect information of the user, thus allowing the user to see whatever projects we have. To sum it up, the facts are there is the word forget, collect information of the user, and restriction. Since forgetting is not part of the problem, so all we have to do is just implement. How do we implement collection of data with the information of the user and restrict the user? But before we get into the solution, let's try what type of analysis we use. We use use case analysis because we use the unified modeling language here. This is the use case in the previous menu project we have. The use case. It lacks the login scenario. And this is now the use case analysis that we have now with the added login button or login scenario. So the very heart of the solution is just to put a login scenario for our application. So how do we design this? There are three areas of designing. First, we design for the graphical user interface, and then second, we design the entity relationship diagram if there is any data to be relate to, and third, the state chart diagram or the activity diagram that tells on certain states and activities within the system. Now, for the use case narrative, the user logs in, the data user and authenticates login data. If it is valid and authentic, it saves the log. And then the login button state is set to log out. Scene number 2, the user logs in, the data saver authenticates login data. If it is invalid, it tossed a message of invalid entry, and it suggests a sign up for an account. Scene 3 is the user logs in, the user signs up an account, data user validates entry and saves data if valid, prompts the user to first use, and then the login button state is set to log out. The graphical user interface design can be interpreted in two ways using MDI concept: the multiple document interfacing or the single document interfacing. On multiple document interfacing, there are three forms. The first form is the main form, the login form, and of course the create account form. Once the login is successful, the locked area buttons are unlocked. Now, on a single document interfacing, we only see one form. The user clicks the login button, the username and password entry area is up, and then once he clicks the create account, the username and password is pushed down for the first name, middle name, last name area. And once the create account is successful, the third state, you will see on the third state here, you can use already the buttons. Now for the entity relationship diagram, and for our logic design, we use the state chart diagram. 4 areas we need to understand the purposes of this state chart diagram and things we need to do first before we draw the diagram. So here is the diagram. We have two objects, the user and the data saver. The user registers, the user logs in, and the user uses the application and he logs out. On the data saver side, once the user registers, the data saver saves the data. Once the user logs in, the data saver checks the login data, and when it is correct, it opens a session. Once the user logs out, the data saver closes the session. For logic design, another logic design is the class diagram. For our class diagram, we have the attributes, the user ID, the first name, the middle name, the last name, the username, password, and the rule. Two behaviors, we have the login and the logout. On the data saver, we have an attribute, session ID, and 3 behavior, saving logs, saving account, and checking entry. The fourth stage of software development implementation is implementation. The integrated development environment we use is Visual Studio. The framework is .NET Framework. The programming language used is C#. Now let us create two classes. We have the user class, users class, and of course the data savers class. On the users class, I create a constructor class. The constructor class is the name of the class itself without a data type in it. In this case, the constructor class, I pass uname and password as parameters because that is the fundamental data when we logged in. On the data saver, we have the data saver inherited by the users. You can see here, this means inheritance. Therefore, data saver inherits users. The base class is the user, and the derived class is the data saver. Let us implement it in our interface class. In our form 1, we add the login button and we set all buttons to false. Their enabled property is set to false. And then once the user clicks the login, it calls the login form and the user can enter already the username and password. However, if he click the sign up button, it brings him to the sign up account. Or when he checks in by just simply putting the data in the username and password, it calls the user object with the parameters of username and password here to check whether the username and password is within the data savers. Check entry validity. So that's it. Using classes, a developer can create layer of abstraction and encapsulate the needed methods and attributes. Instead of calling the details of the user's attribute and its method, the developer just simply calls the class. Calling it is made easy by just instantiating the class either with or without parameters. In this case, we set the username and password as parameters in logging in because it is fundamental data. Hiding the details makes our work cleaner and simpler.